Thank you. Well, one thing that's not on there is I'm not a professional speaker, which makes me the one out of the four that you're hearing from tonight. So bear with me in that regard. I also had no idea what a duck face was until I Googled it back there. So I'm clearly in touch with the millennial generation. The good news is, though, you talked about entertainment. I was a break dancer, so we'll talk about that later. So I want to talk about a few things, but before I do, you saw a lot of great stats about millennials. I want to open with actually some statements about a generation that I pulled, and there's 4 statements. It came from a leading publication on demographic trends. This is a generation more likely to seek a balance of work and leisure activities than any of their predecessors. They tend to boomerang after college, which means that nearly half of them are going to go back and live with their parents until they're in their late 20s. 3, they rely on financial support from their parents, and many of them actually get an allowance still. In fact, when asked, only 25% of them are financially independent from their parents. And 4th, managers and executives who worked hard to achieve their success are completely baffled by this generation's unwillingness to go out and make sacrifices for the betterment of their career. There were some head nods out there as I mentioned all those. What I didn't tell you is that was actually from a 1995 article about my generation, Generation X. In spite of that, we've overcome it, but how quick we all are to forget about how different we were when we were coming out of college and how our different perspectives were. And it's really important. I'm going to talk, because I'm in the money business, about millennials and money for the balance of my time. And I'm going to give you some stats, and it's going to get real boring because we're talking about financial stuff, but I'm going to talk about things that I think are relevant. Debt. We talked about debt. Kevin mentioned debt. The number I have is $24,000. I saw a new number this morning that said $35,000 in college debt. This is no joke. This is meaningful for 2 reasons. There was a study that was actually released yesterday that suggests that male American workers made less in 2014 than they would have in 1973. You have less money, more debt. I do math for a living. That's bad math. The other side is the psychological aspects of this. Half of the millennials are losing sleep over debt. Young people losing sleep over debt. And then 30% report they would sell an organ to get rid of their student loans. This is a true survey result. I would stop for a second and I would tell you, if you're in this 1/3 of that millennial population that's willing to do that, be very selective about which organ you sell. I'm not a doctor, but I do think that some of them you can't live without, so choose wisely. Retirement. This is where we tend to live in my business. 40% of millennials are not saving for retirement at all. That's bothersome because 2/3 of millennials know that they're going to have to fund their own retirement. Meanwhile, for the 40% that do actually save, we can see how they invest. And almost 2/3 of them are investing using things that we call turnkey solutions. Basically, they want other people to make the big investment decisions for them. Last thing I'd mention is about savings. This is a good and a great saving generation. Millennials on average are saving $425 a month. Compare that to the entire American workforce, and the entire American workforce is saving $568 a month. That includes the boomers and the Gen Xers, who are making more money than the millennials on average. Unfortunately, those savings don't go to investing. This is a generation that doesn't take risk. 86% of them are sitting 100% in cash, earning 0. So let's talk for a second about how we got here. It was Maya Angelou. She had a great quote, and I'm going to read you this quote because I don't want to botch it up in respect for her. She once said, "You are the sum total of everything you've ever seen, heard, eaten, smelled, been told, and forgot." We all know that. We're the collection of our experiences. That generally is what derives and makes our outcomes and our values. So let's walk through the leading edge, those 35-year-olds, the leading edge of the millennial generation as they were coming into adulthood. Well, they hit college in the go-go years. Late 90s, 2000, stock market is on fire. It's at all-time highs. Unemployment, lows. Meanwhile, the internet is revolutionizing the entire world, and every day you pick up a paper, you saw some 20-year-old out there who is now a billionaire. Those were good times. While they were in college, dot-com crash happened. Boom, market falls out of bed, unemployment spikes, and while 4 years later when they got out, things were better, the job market still kind of stunk. Fast forward 4 years into their grown-up lives, the bottom fell out again in 2008. 2008 comes along, the U.S. economy literally almost fell off a cliff. almost fell off a cliff. Jobless number, which is the green line up here, is through the roof. The stock market tanks back to levels not seen since the mid-1990s. If you survived that, you kept your job, which wasn't all that common for the youngest of people out there, you kind of fast forward to 2010, 11, you're 29, you're 30, you're thinking, hey, it's time for me to settle down. Maybe I'm going to go out and buy a house. Well, if you tried to do that, you know what happened next. The economy was not fully recovered, and then you as a first-time borrower went to the bank, and the bank said, well, things are a little different now because of the events that brought us into 2008 and 2009. So it's been a continued event and series of events that have phased and shaped this generation, and we can very clearly see that happening. It's no wonder why they value financial certainty and economic certainty. So the question is now what? And I'll leave you with this. There's two challenges I would leave for you. If you are a millennial, I would urge you to educate yourselves early and often as it relates to financial matters. We find in looking at people that are in things like 401k plans, they tend not to care really or engage about retirement savings until their account balance equals their current salary. Get in before that. You can have a higher probability of success. And then two, for those of you that are like me, that have this huge responsibility, humbling responsibility of managing big workforces of millennials, I would tell you this, we've got to think about the world differently. Kevin hit it when he said it, True said it as well. I'm sure you're going to hear the same after me. You need to think about the world differently because the world is evolving and we need to evolve with it so that we can maintain high productivity and be the best economy in the world. Continued. So, thank you.